Hello and welcome to the Real Health Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Leah Williamson, and Holly can't be here today. She's had some stuff come up, so she'll be here next week. So don't worry. Today it's just me and my wonderful guest. My guest today is Lisa Fitzpatrick. Lisa is a physiotherapist with over 30 years of experience with a focus on women's pelvic health. Holistic wellness, yoga, mindfulness, meditation, women's empowerment, and women's health underpin all of her beautiful work. Welcome to the podcast, Lisa Fitzpatrick.
Thank you, Leah. So great to be here.
I'm so glad to have you on. I had the pleasure of meeting Lisa through her wonderful course. It's called Womankind Pelvic Floor Yoga Teacher Training. And we just finished up last week, and it was just so lovely. I loved every minute of it. And you gave me so many great insights into the pelvic floor and how many kind of like health conditions and issues can stem from there. And I was so fascinated by gut health. And even though I've been working in the nutrition field for so long, I just was like, didn't make that connection.
Yes.
And I'm not sure that many people realize either. So we're going to get a little bit into that today. But first, I would just really love for you to tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to doing this beautiful work that you do.
Yes, yes. Well, I really got into this work through like a lot of us getting into work through our own battles, our own demons, those things that we're so challenged by often shape us into the people we're meant to be in life. And so for me, health was a huge aspect all through my life. So it was a no-brainer. I really, really wanted to be a naturopath, actually. But I was so pleasantly surprised to get the marks to get into physio, and then I was very disappointed by the mainstream world and the mainstream medical world. Like a lot of people, it just didn't seem to hold the solutions. When I kind of ended up in a hospital system, realizing that people were eating food that had been processed 12 times to get to their plate, and that they were in chronic end stage disease, and that our focus was on supporting someone in end stage and chronic conditions rather than really looking at metaphysical and early cause. So that really got me interested in yoga, actually, because I think fundamentally yoga is about us addressing the metaphysical before it becomes physical. So for me, yoga was an amazing way to deal with stress and an amazing way to also look at capturing the preventative care world and supporting people while they're still relatively able to turn their conditions around. And then because of a very, very, very traumatic divorce that I had about 15 years ago now, I found the whole world of inequality. And this really put a spin of feminism into my work. And I started a coaching business called Sacred Women's Business because there was a genuine desire for me to also understand how to support women to find their own unique individual feminine power in the world, because I was seeing a world that was very stacked actually against matriarchal values. And I felt like there was so far we had to go to get our women to, have the same, I guess, attention given to their particular way of being in the world, which is very cyclic, which is rather mercurial, which is not linear, and often does not fit this 9 to 5 model, I guess, that we have as a more of a patriarchal template for living. And I think, all of my loves combined have led me to develop the trainings that I now do and the work that I do. And I think that the female embodiment process, if women can really live in their bodies strongly, then that will support their abilities to actually speak up in life. And so pelvic health has become such a deep specialty for me for that reason, that I truly believe that when we show up in our bodies and when we show up in those parts of ourselves that are often difficult and hard to face, then we really find ways of actually, being strong in the world, and offering our medicine as women as well.
I love that. It's just like it just making me think of your life as a younger woman, going through the world, doing all the things that we think that we should be doing because that's what society is telling us to do. And then all of a sudden, like even just for myself in the, after the family, I guess, is, growing and you're kind of like more settled, you're like, oh, where is my place really in this world? It's not out there doing these things that people are telling me I'm supposed to be doing. It's more over here. And it's just like you're discovering a new world every day. It's something about your body, something about the world, something about your life, something about how women's beautiful relationships should be with each other rather than against each other. Like, it's such a, I don't know, a whole juicy new world out there that I'm like really enjoying exploring. And yoga is such a good foundation for that as well, to really, open that pathway up, I think. So
I love everything you said, especially the part about women lifting each other up and supporting one another, because really on a very primitive level, hunters and gatherers, the gatherers who were the women did work shoulder to shoulder, and there wasn't that. Well, perhaps there was, but there was competition. We can only guess, but the fact is, working together as women is how a village and how a community it becomes, the strong place that it needs to be to raise functional children and adults. And I think, as a mother, there's something very sacred about us taking that vow to really honor the feminine in our sisters and our friends and our mothers and our grandmothers. And that is something very, very precious to us as women.
I love that. Oh. So just for our US listeners, we call the work that you do physiotherapist, but I believe in America it's a physical therapist. Is that correct? Yes. So no difference there. I just wanted to bring that up because we do have a lot of American listeners. And so one of the areas of the female body, I guess, I'm talking particularly in females, but is the pelvic floor. Like we hear about it. We know we should do something about that area, or we know we may be experiencing issues. We're not sure if it's in that area, but there's so many things that come up there. But before we get into any of those, could you tell us a little bit about the anatomy, just briefly, so people have an understanding where the area is that we're discussing?
Yeah, sure. I always have to giggle a little. It's so sweet. I have a few elderly clients, and they truly believe that pelvic floor exercises must be done on the floor. So I'm so glad you asked this question, because people don't really know what the pelvic floor is. And so the pelvic floor muscles are that group of muscle that runs from the pubic bone to the tailbone. But where I like to think of the anatomy going, because again, my mind automatically goes to this idea of the body being a portal, is that the base of the pelvis is a diamond shape. We have a tailbone at the back, a pubic bone at the front, and sitting bones on either side. And those bony points of the pelvis create a diamond shape known as our perineum. And so the pelvic floor muscles are a group of muscles that lie within the parameters of the perineum, and they are actually very complex. There are 16 muscles that need to be considered in the physiology. And that physiology can also be easily disturbed by life events. So we have an entire story unfolding in our pelvis as we go through life. And that story will often show up in the form of physiological changes, some of them that may not be positive in nature. And this is mind-blowing to me that even our cultural and religious beliefs can affect the physiology of our pelvic floor. It's such a deep root inside of us. And the yogis also refer to it as an energetic center also, which we can explore. From a Western medical point of view, we have a superficial and deep layer, just to put it very simply. And the deeper layer of the pelvic floor is responsible for holding the pelvic organs suspended. So when we talk about the pelvic floor, we're not necessarily talking so much about those organs that it supports, but they're really hard to separate from how important the whole function is.
Yeah. And so and just to say, it's not just women who have a pelvic floor either, right? So
thank you. Yes,
yeah.
that's right. The only difference, obviously, although the other beautiful thing about this any exploration of the pelvis is how nuanced it can be between the male and female spectrums. So we do have about 1% of the population who are intersex who may have undefinable or ambiguous genitalia. But we do also know in the male pelvic floor, there are several similarities to a female, other than aside from the vaginal canal, of course, and the uterus. But actually, some of our major pelvic organs can also be present in both male and female as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Great. And so, so things that, when we're thinking about our pelvic floor, most women think, oh, that doesn't happen to me. It's just from after having a baby or something like that.
Yes.
It's like you hear the analogies around like, oh, I had children and now I can't jump on the trampoline, or I sneeze, or those type of things happening. But that's not also the case, is it? It can happen. So we're talking physically rather than emotionally at the moment.
Yes.
But yeah, correct. So there's other physical things that can happen with age.
Yes. Yeah. Correct. Yes. So with the childbirth will increase our risk of certain pelvic health disorders by about 50% if it's a natural vaginal delivery. But if we don't have children, we still do run risks around conditions like urinary incontinence, constipation, pelvic organ prolapse, and painful sex. So there are a lot of things that the childbearing years can hold for women as well, if we're not educated and aware of where we may be putting our bodies at risk. And I think that's what I feel so passionately about in the world of exercise, including obviously the world of yoga, because I do see a lot of dangerous practices happening at my local gym and in a lot of yoga classes. And I do feel that we're still really trying to get the word out there that there are certain things we need to be super, super mindful of.
And we went through such a big phase in the kind of fitness world where you had to lift heavy. Everything was like, lift as heavy as you can, and women can lift too, which I love that idea. But
yes.
It also brings with it a whole lot of, and I even know from myself, I was like, I love to lift heavy. I've got good strong thighs. I can lift heavy.
Yes.
Lift all this weight. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh, I don't know if I should be lifting this weight. Things don't feel so good back here. I need to actually go back and start working on my core muscles first. And that's when that kind of led me into Pilates and yoga and things like that. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot to look out for in that kind of fitness world as well. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. Absolutely. And there's such a decision to be made sometimes about symptom control. So, exposing our body to a lot of pressure will often lead to symptoms that someone who's not exposing their body to pressure doesn't necessarily have, but it doesn't mean that there's not underlying weaknesses or disturbances in the balance of the physiology. So it is complex and it is very individuated as well. Yeah.
Definitely. Yes. And I love also, one thing you told us a lot in our course was also that you can have a very strong core and still have a weak pelvic floor. So do you want to explain just a little bit about that too?
Yeah, that's a really big one. So because of the emphasis on strong core, sometimes we'll have what's known as an overactive pelvic floor. Back when I trained 30 years ago, it was more known as a hypertonic or high-toned pelvic floor. We now know that muscles aren't necessarily sitting at a high tone in this condition, but they've been overactivated towards strength, and there hasn't been possibly enough attention towards relaxation of the muscle. And as a result, they lose this range of movement and responsiveness that is necessary for continence and support. But also in an overactive pelvic floor, it is the most common cause of painful penetrative sex for females, especially. So sometimes we'll need to pull people back from strong core training to correct the possibility that it's causing painful sex. We might also see in a really overactive muscle some fatigue from the problems that that muscles really perhaps hit its prime by midday, and then by the rest of the day there's a tiredness that sets in. And so a lot of women's continence issues and symptoms like pelvic pain can get worse as the day progresses, and that muscle gets very tired, or that group, I should say, that group of muscles, because often it is the abdominal wall that we see in an overactive pelvis as well. Athletic women as well, just on that note, because we need a really healthy ability to soften the muscles as much as we need that shortening, strengthening, tightening. Over very, very athletic women will often need intervention during natural vaginal delivery due to this overactivity happening. So there's a lot at stake for a younger woman who's training a lot, that actually a lot of my work with my obstetrician gynecologist colleague that I run a clinic with involves down training the pelvic floor muscles and really teaching those muscles what it does mean to relax and soften and receive, and also receive the breath as well.
So fascinating.
Yes.
So drawing back, we're going to shine a little bit of a light on the gut health side of it, because we love to talk nutrition on the podcast as well. So,
yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit about the relationship between this? Because it's very fascinating.
It really is. It's so amazing how linked they are. So there's a few roads I could go down with this link too, because we could look at it from the fact that the gut biome itself is influencing the vaginal pH. And so on that level, we have a vaginal biome, I guess you could call it, that sets us up for ideal conditions, i.e. healthy vaginal health. And healthy vaginal discharge and lubrication when it comes to sex, and all of the things that go into making us feel comfortable down below as women. And if we mess with that, and introduce the wrong pH value, lubricants and other things like that, then there can be issues there. But the other most important thing is how important the gut biome and the gut health is to our regularity with elimination. Because if we have really healthy gut support, and then we produce a healthy stool regularly, and the average or the normal parameters are up to 3 bowel movements a day, or at least no less than 1 every 3 days, then that will actually support the pelvic floor muscles to be physiologically consistent and sound in their particular ability to function. So one of the biggest, most damaging conditions we can see in a pelvic floor over time is chronic constipation, because that bearing down action and the strain and the impact that has on pelvic floor physiology is really quite disturbing and quite profound. So it is something we work on correcting Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I love that connection between both those. And we have an article in about the constipation that I'll just draw on, and we'll link that up into the show notes for our listeners to have a look at. But yeah, it's that they talk a bit about the straining kind of aspect of it here. And they're suggesting that some of the ways to kind of to, I guess, help with not straining so much is to practice deep breathing. And so there's a couple of things here. I might just run quickly through what they suggest, and then we might talk about what you might suggest as well, and whether these kind of suggestions are what you consider okay. So breath, I'm pretty sure you will agree with breath. This one is trying not to sit on the toilet too long, because a lot of people who are constipated will try and sit there because they have that urge that they feel like they need to go and nothing's happening.
Yes.
Also, they're saying maybe changing the position of how you're sitting on the toilet. So like having a toilet squat stool, or a squatty potty, as people refer them to, as it says, don't do too much extra movement or wiggling of the hips and things like that. And then it talks about diet, which we can talk a little bit about that too as well. And I think with the movement one, it was saying like sometimes when you're moving around too much, it says it can cause your pelvic floor and other muscles to tense, which can create a kink in the hose, so to speak, is what it's saying here. So there's some of the suggestions that they're saying in this article. What are your thoughts around what they're saying?
They're all really valuable points, and the forward lean on the toilet is a really big one to bring the anorectal angle and open it into a more amenable position. So I like the forward lean is a huge part of that. Hydration is a massive one for a lot of people, that when we get dehydrated, the body will definitely take as much as it can from the bowel motion and hold the bowel motion for as long as it can to take that extra bit of hydration. So it is really important that we get our 1.75 liters a day if we can. The other thing that they didn't say, I agree with all of their points. There was one thing they didn't say, which I see a lot in clinic, which is those people that are really terrified of sitting on a public toilet seat, who are pretty much in a very activated patterning with their lower limbs. This goes to alongside that thing of not moving around too much on the toilet, because it really needs to be a very passive, relaxed experience for the body to eliminate properly. So if someone is very much a hoverer and they're not actually letting themselves relax and soften into the experience of the bowel elimination, not a good outcome for a lot of people. I would definitely say take your sanitizer or your disposable toilet seat with you if you have this, or wait till, or no, get your routine so that you can be at home or somewhere private. And then another product that the obstetrician I work with, Dr. Dilger, and I recommend to most women, especially pregnant women, is called Motion Potion, which is a very witchy name for a very excellent product. What makes this particular, and I'm not an ambassador for the product, I'm not a brand ambassador, so there's no stakes in this. I just find it particularly helpful. What the thing that makes it such a good product is it's mainly psyllium fiber, so it makes sure that the fiber needs of a woman's body and men can be taken care of. And it also has amazing levels of pre and probiotic fiber for the gut health. So if someone's suffering from a very inconsistent stool pattern, where they might be really runny one day and really solid the next and constipated the next, it will really regulate that stool type. And we want really, sorry, I hope this isn't too much information, but we're desiring a type 4 or 3 stool type on the Bristol chart, which is like a ripe banana. And so if the bowel motion is regulated, the pelvic floor muscles can then start to develop some consistency in the way that they operate also. So motion potion's great, and a cheaper cousin to that is actually just the psyllium husks alone, which then add a good level of fiber.
Yeah.
And I was quite horrified not so long ago to see how many patients get put on Metamucil after their surgeries. And no offense to the company, but food coloring, artificial sweeteners, some of the ingredients in some of the bowel products are incredibly irritating to the bladder. So if someone has an urgency issue with their bladder, or they have an issue with their bladder, they have to be quite careful about what they're doing to help bowel regularity, because the truth is, if we have bowel issues, it will often impact the bladder as well. And so the natural instinct is to reach for something that makes you more regular bowel-wise. But some of the ingredients can be so damaging for bladder health. So we've got to be quite careful there.
Definitely. I love all those suggestions. And water, it's just such a, so many people are so dehydrated, and such a simple, it's free, it's like, it's a very easy one to do. So I think, when thinking about constipation, sometimes it's it can be diet related, dehydration. It can also be that tenseness and that stress as well. And I love that you spoke to that as well. Because I'm a nutritionist, my friends and I, we talk a lot about pooping. So it's just, comes naturally with it. Always talking about the stool chart. And but one thing we laugh about is, or not really laugh, but it's, at least we're having a conversation about it, is that some people really do feel like if we go away for the weekend, it's really hard to use another bathroom.
Yes.
Really. And they were telling me stories about, like, not even wanting to go at work, their workplace, so they will hold on all day. Some people, and until it becomes very urgent. So you can imagine there's like, they're holding in all day this load, that needs to come out, and then rushing to get somewhere and expel it out all very quickly in one go, which can't be very good either for the whole area.
So true. True. I didn't think of that one that wasn't in the article, which was this idea that once we have an urge, we really should go soon after that urge comes with the bowel. But with the bladder, we kind of have the opposite rule for people, especially people with frequency or urgency, provided that we've excluded urinary tract infection as a cause. We really shouldn't just empty the bladder just in case. It sets the bladder up for some bad habits. And the bowel's the opposite.
So, what am I doing here? But it is too, just tuning in and listening to your body. But like Holly and I are very big advocates for listening to the signs and symptoms that your body is telling you, because the body loves you. It's giving you these messages for a reason. So tune in and find out, is it, if I need to go to the bladder empty, if it's bowel, okay.
Yes, absolutely. And busyness is a real curse on our sensitivity levels to this part of our bodies. And the other, there's a lot to be said for the state of the nervous system. So I like the advice to do the deep breathing, because when we have strong nervous system resilience and we have good polyvagal tone, we will actually set our body up for the ideal conditions for a poised response to life and to elimination. Is a part of that, because when we're super relaxed and when life is running at the pace that I think nature intended us to, we do have a much better digestive system in general. So
definitely. All right, well, just one little quick article to finish up with, because I know that I could keep you all day, and we can't keep going, which is always a good thing, because we can always get you back to talk about other areas. So this article I found, I was just like, what? This is the title even. It says, "Wobbly shoes to stop endless dashes for loo. How footwear that contracts your pelvic floor muscles could put an end to leaks caused by urinary incontinence." And it's just basically saying, I think it's in England, they're trialing these shoes that when you walk can kind of put your feet in a different position to kind of, I guess, maybe tilt the pelvic floor in a way that's not going to cause these issues. But I just wanted to let everyone know that the shoes, they are £2,480, which I've converted to $4,233 Australian dollars and 2,800 US dollars. So,
Amazing.
and they're trialing them already for people who have osteoarthritis to see whether these shoes are better for them than having an actual knee replacement.
I see.
So I can see, in that respect, they're trying to kind of like circumnavigate, not having surgery for people that might not be able to have such major surgery. These shoes could be helpful. I actually was very curious because they never put a picture of the shoes on the actual article. So I Googled them, and they just remind me of like a little bit of space shoes. They look like a sneaker, and then on the bottom are like two kind of rubber ball kind of things. They remind me of like those space hopper kind of shoes or something like that. So anyway, what do you think about shoes? Maybe there might be a better solution than just the shoes, or something that could be more helpful, right? If you can't afford the $4,000 shoes. And I was saying off air to Lisa, I was like, if I'm going to spend $4,000 on shoes, I want them to be like Louis Vuittons or something that I can collect.
Oh, and in response to that, I think I said people will do anything to avoid doing their 3 sets of 10 pelvic floor strengthening exercises daily, which is, a gold standard, or 3 sets of 8 as the British Continence Society would recommend. So just plain simple pelvic floor exercise is incredibly effective, above and beyond spending the money on shoes. But it also is surprising how many women don't actually engage correctly as well. So correct pelvic floor engagement does not involve gluteal strengthening or thigh muscles working or inner thigh muscles working or even abdominals working, although they may be a secondary muscle to support the action. And a lot of women are also bearing down or bearing out to gain strength in that area of the body. So we do ask that a muscle contraction be drawn towards the spine for it to be effective for continence purposes and for support. With a pair of shoes like that, it's a similar argument to putting someone on a pharmaceutical drug, that we can find that there are secondary side effects of these decisions. And so what I think alarmed me the most about the shoes was that because they challenge the balance in the body, they become a way of us activating. So the side effects of that could be that we end up in an overactive pattern, which is still also prone to sometimes incontinence, urinary incontinence. And that also, and painful sex is another consequence of that. But also that if someone has a fall because the shoe has challenged their balance, and anyone over 50 is actually starting that road of really needing to sharpen balance. So there is a real genuine risk that if we introduce those shoes to someone postmenopausal who has a few balance challenges anyway, that we're going to have a pretty bad fall on our hands. So
I know.
Be very careful.
Then they'll need to put them back on again for their knee replacement. So.
Or the hip replacement that comes from the fall. That's right. Look, keeping things simple, and also keeping things consistent and regular, because we don't need to do a lot. We just need to do a tiny bit often to get good results. And I think that one very wonderful article that I saw recently, which I thought was so great, was that even they were doing a test on the levator ani muscle, which is the muscle that supports the organs and often supports continence in the pelvic floor as well. And they showed that no matter what age we are, even a 100-year-old woman can improve the shape and the strength of the pelvic floor muscles. And so it's never too late for us to introduce some gentle exercise to this area, and awareness, bring awareness as well. And I think that's really comforting to know.
Yeah.
You know, you've never reached the point of no return.
I love that. And what a beautiful way to end the podcast. There is hope. I was just going to ask one last question though, before like we've talked about a lot of different things. If someone's listening and they're like, well, I'm not sure what to do, where to start, what's your number one tip for somebody that's feeling that way?
Yeah. Well, first of all, go and see your local women's health physical therapist or physiotherapist, and don't suffer in silence. Do reach out for support. There are incredible resources with the Continence Foundation organizations in most countries as well. They have really, really excellent education. Be very careful of Dr. Google. So go with a Continence Foundation or a health site that is reputable and has good research behind it. And don't be alarmed by some of the subterfuge. I think the good thing is, though, even in the fact that someone's developing shoes, the fact that there's attention to pelvic care is a real positive, and we're seeing a plethora of amazing gimmicks and products as a result, but it is good because it's coming from that place of higher awareness. So it's great.
I love that positive spin on it, definitely. Yes. And if people want to reach out to you or find out some of your services or courses that you're offering, what's the best place to find you?
Thank you for asking. So I'm at Instagram. My handle is at Sacred Women's Business. And I also have a website, which is in progress, at www.lisafitzpatrick.com.au. And that has a few of my courses on the services tab. And it's been such a treat to chat with you, Leah. And it was such a treat to have you in the training as well.
Oh, thank you. I'm so glad that we're connected, and I've loved speaking with you today, and I love the course. So if there's any yoga teachers or anyone listening that's very interested in it, I totally recommend it. And I'll put a link in the show notes for all those details if people want to go and find them.
Wonderful.
So thank you so much, Lisa, for sharing your wisdom with us today. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks. My absolute pleasure.
Well, that's the end of today's episode. Our theme music is by Andrew Bowden, and production services are by Kevin Kennedy Spain of Disc of Light Media. Have a great week, everyone.